Loved her, and I thought she loved me back. I was wrong about a lot of things. The first sign something was off came about 3 months ago. Julia started getting mysterious phone calls that she'd take in the other room, speaking in hushed tones. She'd come back with that bright fake smile and say it was work, always work. When I asked about it, she'd get defensive. "You don't trust me?" she'd say, and somehow I'd end up apologizing. Then there were the late dinners, business meetings that ran until 10 or 11 at night, weekend conferences that popped up at the last minute, new clothes that she claimed were necessary for client presentations, a sudden interest in going to the gym, which was funny because Julia had always said exercise was for people who didn't have better things to do. I'm not stupid, I know the signs, but I also know Julia, or thought I did. She's ambitious, driven, focused on her career. It made sense that she'd be working harder, especially since she'd been angling for a promotion to senior account executive. The second sign was her friends. Julia has always surrounded herself with a particular type of woman, the kind who lunch at expensive restaurants and gossip about everyone they know. Her inner circle consists mainly of Lexi and Priya, 2 women who treat drama like it's their full-time job. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Lexi is a real estate agent who specializes in selling overpriced condos to divorced men having midlife crises. She's loud, theatrical, and has never met a secret she couldn't spill after 2 glasses of wine. Priya works in marketing and has the kind of perfectly curated social media presence that makes you wonder if she's ever had a genuine emotion in her life. These 2 have been Julia's best friends since college, and they've never particularly liked me. I'm too sarcastic, too cynical, too unwilling to pretend that their endless conversations about designer handbags and celebrity gossip are fascinating. They tolerate me because I'm married to Julia, but I've always felt like an outsider when the 3 of them get together. About 6 weeks ago, I started noticing that their conversations would stop when I entered the room. Not gradually, not naturally, but abruptly, like someone had hit a pause button. They'd all turn to look at me with these bright, guilty smiles, and then Lexi would say something like, "Oh, Dan, we were just talking about work stuff, boring advertising things you wouldn't be interested in." But I caught fragments, enough to know they weren't talking about work. "He sounds amazing," I heard Priya say one afternoon when I came home early from a client meeting. "Julia deserves someone who appreciates her," Lexi replied. When I walked into the kitchen, they were suddenly very interested in their salads. The third sign was Phil Morrison, my colleague at the consulting firm where I work. Phil and I have been friends for 5 years, ever since he started working there. He's the kind of guy who remembers your birthday, asks about your weekend plans, and always offers to grab you coffee when he's making a run to the break room. A good friend, or so I thought. About a month ago, Phil started asking a lot of questions about Julia. How was she doing? Was she enjoying her new projects at work? Had she mentioned any interesting clients lately? At first, I thought he was just being polite, making conversation. Phil has always been socially awkward, the kind of person who asks about your spouse because he's read somewhere that it's what good friends do. But the questions got more specific. Was Julia working late tonight? Did she mention where she was going for that client dinner? Had I met any of her new colleagues? I started paying attention to Phil's questions, and I started noticing that they seemed to coincide with Julia's mysterious schedule changes. When Phil asked if Julia was working late, she'd come home 3 hours later than expected. When he asked about client dinners, she'd suddenly have one that evening. It could have been coincidence. Probably was coincidence. But after 8 years of marriage, you develop instincts about these things. The fourth sign was technology. Julia has always been careful about her phone, but recently she'd become obsessive. She'd take it with her to the bathroom, to the kitchen when she was making coffee, even to bed. She changed her passcode, something she'd never done in all our years together. When I asked about it, She said she'd been having problems with spam calls and wanted to be more secure. She also started staying up late on her laptop, claiming she was working on presentations or catching up on emails. But I'm an IT guy. I know the difference between someone typing up a report and someone having a conversation. The pattern of her keystrokes, the way she'd pause and then type quickly, the little smiles that would cross her face when she thought I wasn't looking, it all pointed to one thing. She was talking to someone. The fifth sign was the most obvious, and the one that took me the longest to acknowledge. Julia had stopped trying to include me in her life. We used to talk about our days, share stories about difficult clients or annoying coworkers. She'd ask for my advice on projects, and I'd complain to her about the latest technological crisis I'd been called in to solve. But over the past few months, those conversations had dried up. When I asked about her day, she'd give me generic answers. Fine. Busy. The usual. When I tried to tell her about something interesting that had happened at work, she'd nod politely, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. We were becoming strangers living in the same house, and the worst part was that Julia seemed perfectly happy with the arrangement. So that brings us to last Tuesday night, October 15th, at exactly 10:57 p.m. I remember the time precisely because I was watching the late news, and they'd just finished the weather forecast. Julia was supposed to be home by 9:30 from what she'd described as a quick dinner meeting with a potential client. My phone buzzed with a text message from her. Late dinner with clients, don't wait up, sorry, we'll make it up to you tomorrow. Love you. I stared at that message for a long time. Something about it bothered me, beyond the obvious fact that she was 3 hours late and hadn't bothered to call. The tone was wrong, too casual, too breezy. And there was something else, something that made my consultant's brain start working. Julia had mentioned earlier that she was meeting with a potential client, singular, but her text said clients, plural. A small detail, the kind of thing most people wouldn't notice. But I noticed details. It's what I do for a living. I was tired, frustrated, and more than a little suspicious. So I did something I'd never done before in 8 years of marriage. I decided to push back. I typed out a response. Tell Robert I said hi. He's a terrible tipper. I sent it without thinking, a sarcastic jab born out of frustration and suspicion. Robert was a name I'd heard Julia mention a few times recently, always in the context of work. A new client, she'd said, someone important who could help her career. I didn't expect what happened next. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Julia's name appeared on the screen, and when I answered, she was sobbing. How did you know? She whispered through her tears. Dan, how did you know? And that's when I realized that my random sarcastic guess had just blown up my entire marriage. I sat there holding the phone, listening to my wife cry, and for a moment I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete clarity. All those months of suspicious behavior, mysterious phone calls, and late-night work meetings suddenly made perfect sense. Julia was having an affair, and Robert wasn't just a client, he was her lover. Julia, I said, keeping my voice steady, where are you? I'm at... She was struggling to form words between sobs. Dan, please, I can explain everything. Where are you? I repeated. I'm at Robert's apartment, but it's not what you think. We were just talking about the campaign, and then... Stop, I said. Just stop talking and come home. I hung up the phone and walked to the kitchen, where I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey. My hands were shaking, but not from anger, from relief. For months I'd been questioning my own instincts, wondering if I was being paranoid or jealous or unreasonable. Now I knew the truth, and the truth, however painful, was better than uncertainty. Julia came home 47 minutes later. I was still sitting at the kitchen table with my whiskey, and when she walked in, I could see that she'd been crying. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was disheveled, and she looked like someone who'd just been caught in the worst possible way. "Dan," she started, but I held up my hand. "Sit down," I said. She sat across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. 8 years of marriage, and I felt like I was seeing her clearly for the first time. "How long?" I asked. "It's not what you think." "How long, Julia?" She took a shaky breath. 3 months. 3 months. Right around the time I'd started noticing the changes in her behavior. "Tell me about Robert," I said. "He's a client. He was a client. His company hired our agency to handle their new product launch, and I was assigned to his account. We started working closely together and—" She trailed off. "And?" "And he's everything you're not," she said. And there it was. The truth, finally. He's successful, ambitious, confident. He drives a Porsche and lives in a penthouse and takes me to restaurants I'd never heard of. He makes me feel special, Dan. Important. And I don't? She looked away. You make me feel safe, comfortable. But that's not the same thing. I finished my whiskey and set the glass down carefully. So what happens now? I don't know, she said. I never meant for this to happen. I love you, Dan. I do. But I think I love him too. You think? I don't know, she snapped, showing the first flash of her real personality. This is all very confusing for me. I never expected to feel this way about someone else. I almost laughed. Confusing for her, as if I was just a minor inconvenience in her great romantic drama. Well, I said, standing up, you've got some thinking to do. I'm going to bed. Dan, wait. Can't we talk about this? What's to talk about? You've been lying to me for 3 months. You're in love with another man. You've made your choice, Julia. Now you get to live with the consequences. I went upstairs and slept in the guest room, and when I woke up the next morning, Julia was already gone. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to work early. We need to talk tonight, I'm sorry. But I wasn't ready to talk. I was ready to think, to plan, and to figure out exactly how much damage my wife had done to our life together. I called in sick to work and spent the day going through our finances. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Over the past 3 months, Julia had been spending money like she was trying to impress someone. Expensive dinners, new clothes, jewelry I'd never seen her wear, spa treatments, and salon visits. She'd also been making cash withdrawals, large ones with no explanation in our budget spreadsheet. I added it up. Julia had spent almost $12,000 of our money on her affair. That afternoon, I drove to her office building and sat in the parking lot, watching. I didn't have a plan exactly. I just wanted to see her, to observe her in her natural environment, to try to understand who she'd become. At 5:30, she emerged from the building with 2 other women I recognized as her colleagues. They were laughing about something, and Julia looked happy, relaxed, more animated than I'd seen her in months. They got into Julia's car and drove to a wine bar downtown. I followed at a distance, feeling like a private investigator in a bad movie. They sat at a table near the window, and I could see them talking animatedly. Julia was gesturing with her hands, smiling, clearly telling a story that her friends found entertaining. I went home and waited. Julia came back at 9:15, looking guilty again. Where were you? I asked. Having drinks with Lisa and Amanda from work. I needed to talk to someone about us. And what did they tell you? They think I should follow my heart, she said. Your heart? Dan, I know this is hard for you to understand, but what I feel for Robert is different from what I feel for you. It's passionate, exciting. It makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. I stared at her. So you've decided to leave me for him? I haven't decided anything yet, but I think we should consider a trial separation, just for a few months, to give me time to figure out what I really want. A trial separation, I repeated. So you can live with Robert while keeping me as a backup plan. It's not like that. What's it like then? She sighed dramatically. You're being deliberately difficult about this. I'm being difficult? Julia, you've been cheating on me for 3 months, spending our money on another man, lying to me every single day, and I'm the one being difficult? You don't understand the pressure I've been under at work. Robert helped me through a very challenging time in my career. He was there for me when you were too busy with your own projects to notice what I was going through. And there it was. Somehow, this was my fault. What pressure? I asked. You never mentioned any pressure. Because you never asked. You come home every day and complain about your clients, but you never ask about my day, my challenges, my goals. Robert listens to me. He cares about my career. I care about your career. No, you care about your career. You tolerate mine. This was gaslighting at its finest, and I recognized it because I'd seen it before. My sister Molly had gone through something similar with her ex-husband. The cheater becomes the victim, the betrayed spouse becomes the villain, and somehow the affair becomes a reasonable response to marital neglect. Okay, I said. Let's say you're right. Let's say I've been a terrible husband who ignored your needs and drove you into another man's arms. What do you want to do about it? She looked surprised, like she'd expected me to argue with her interpretation of events. I want time, she said. I want space to think clearly about what I want from my life. Fine, I said. Take all the time you need. But understand something, Julia. I'm not going to sit around waiting for you to decide whether I'm good enough for you. If you want a separation, we'll get a separation. If you want a divorce, we'll get a divorce. But I'm not going to be your safety net while you explore your options with Robert. She looked hurt, which was almost funny. I thought you'd fight for me, she said. Fight for you? Julia, you've spent 3 months lying to me, cheating on me, and spending our money on another man. Now you want me to compete for the privilege of staying married to someone who doesn't respect me enough to be honest with me? What exactly am I supposed to be fighting for? She didn't have an answer for that. The next few days were tense, but civil. Julia moved into the guest room and started looking for an apartment. She also started being more obvious about her relationship with Robert, taking his calls in front of me and mentioning him in casual conversation, like he was just a friend. Robert thinks I should apply for the creative director position that's opening up at his company, she said over breakfast one morning. Robert thinks you should leave your current job? I asked. He thinks I'm too talented to be stuck where I am. How convenient that he'd be able to see you every day. It's not about that. It's about my career. Right. Your career. But I was starting to formulate a plan. Julia wanted to play games? Fine. I could play games too, and I had advantages she didn't know about. First, I'm an IT consultant. I know technology, I know surveillance, and I know how to gather information without leaving traces. Second, Julia had underestimated me. She saw me as boring, predictable Dan, who would either fight for her or quietly accept whatever she decided to do. She didn't expect me to fight back strategically. Third, she'd gotten sloppy. People having affairs always do, eventually. They get comfortable, overconfident, and they make mistakes. I was going to help her make a very big mistake. The first thing I did was install a GPS tracking app on Julia's phone. This sounds more sinister than it actually was. We'd both had the app for years, originally installed for safety reasons after Julia had gotten lost during a business trip to Detroit. She'd forgotten about it, and I'd never bothered to remove it. The app showed me exactly where Julia went and when. Over the next week, I learned that she was spending a lot more time at Robert's apartment than she'd admitted. She was also lying about her work schedule. On Tuesday, she told me she had a late meeting with a client, but the GPS showed she went straight to Robert's place after work and stayed there until midnight. On Thursday, she said she was having dinner with Lexi and Priya, but she spent the evening at an expensive steakhouse with Robert, then went back to his apartment. On Saturday, she claimed she needed to go into the office to catch up on paperwork, but she spent 6 hours at Robert's place, then went shopping at stores I couldn't afford, even with both our incomes combined. The GPS data was useful, but it wasn't enough. I needed more information about Robert, about their relationship, and about what Julia was planning for our future. That's when I decided to test my theory about Phil. Phil Morrison had been asking too many questions about Julia's schedule, and those questions seemed to correlate with her mysterious absences. If Phil was feeding information to Julia, or to someone else, I needed to know. On Monday morning, I walked into Phil's cubicle with 2 cups of coffee and a casual smile. "Morning, Phil. Got a minute?" "Sure, Dan. What's up?" "Julia's been working on this big project lately. Really confidential stuff. She can't even tell me the details. Anyway, she's got another late meeting tonight. Probably won't be home until after midnight." Phil nodded sympathetically. "That's rough. These big campaigns can be really demanding." "Yeah, well, that's the business, right?" I paused, then added, "Actually, she mentioned she might need to work late tomorrow night too, depending on how tonight goes." "Tomorrow night?" Phil asked, and I caught something in his voice. Interest, maybe, or concern. "Yeah, she said it could be a really late one. Might even have to work through the weekend if the client isn't happy with the initial presentation." Phil nodded again, but I could see him processing the information. "Well, I hope it goes well for her." "Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that." I went back to my desk and waited. If Phil was passing information to Julia, she'd adjust her plans based on what I'd told him. If not, her schedule would remain the same. That evening, Julia came home at her usual time. "How was work?" I asked. "Good, productive. I got caught up on a lot of things." "No late meetings tonight?" "No, not tonight. Actually, I'm thinking of making it an early evening. Maybe we could watch a movie or something." "Interesting." According to the GPS app, Julia had gone straight home from work, which was unusual for her lately. Either she was genuinely trying to spend time with me, or someone had warned her that I might be paying attention to her schedule. The next day, I tried a different approach with Phil. "Hey, Phil, you know that project Julia's working on? The confidential one?" "Yeah?" Turns out it's not as big a deal as she thought. The client decided to go with a different agency. Phil's face fell. "Oh no, that's terrible. She must be devastated." "Actually, she's relieved. Said it was more trouble than it was worth. Anyway, she's got her evenings free again, at least for now." That's good, I guess. More time for you two to spend together." "Yeah, exactly." That evening, Julia announced that she had a last-minute client dinner. "I thought your big project fell through," I said. She looked surprised. "What big project?" "The confidential one, the one that's been keeping you out so late." "Oh, that. No, this is something different. A new opportunity that just came up." She left at 7 and didn't come home until after 1 in the morning. The GPS showed she'd spent the evening at Robert's apartment. I now had confirmation that Phil was my leak. Somehow, he was connected to Julia's affair, and he was feeding her information about our conversations. The question was whether he was doing it voluntarily or if he was being manipulated. I decided to find out. The next morning, I asked Phil to grab lunch with me at a sports bar near our office. Phil loves sports, especially baseball, and he's always happy to spend an hour talking about the Cubs' latest disappointing season. After we'd ordered our food and settled into a booth, I steered the conversation toward personal topics. "Phil, can I ask you something? Man to man?" "Sure, Dan. What's on your mind?" "Do you think Julia's cheating on me?" Phil nearly choked on his beer. "What? Dan, why would you ask me that?" "Because I think she is, and I think you know something about it." Phil's face went pale. "Dan, I don't know what you're talking about." "Come on, Phil. You've been asking me about Julia's schedule for weeks. You always want to know where she's going, what she's doing, who she's meeting with. And somehow, every time I tell you something, Julia's plans change. That's just coincidence. Is it? Because I tested it. I told you Julia had late meetings when she didn't, and suddenly she came home early. I told you her project fell through, and suddenly she had a new client dinner. Phil was sweating now. Dan, you're being paranoid. Am I? Phil, we've been friends for 5 years. If you know something, I need you to tell me. He stared at his plate for a long time, and when he looked up, his eyes were red. I didn't want to get involved, he said quietly. I never wanted to be part of this. Part of what? Julia. Julia's been seeing someone, a guy named Robert. She asked me to keep an eye on you, to let her know if you were getting suspicious. She asked you to spy on me? Not spy exactly, just pay attention. She said you'd been acting jealous and possessive lately, and she was worried about how you'd react if you found out about Robert. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How long have you known? About 2 months. She approached me at the company picnic, said she needed someone she could trust to help her through a difficult time. And you agreed? Phil looked miserable. She said you two were having problems. She said you'd been emotionally distant and that she'd found someone who understood her better. She made it sound like the marriage was already over and she just needed time to figure out how to end it without hurting you. So you decided to help her lie to me. I thought I was helping both of you. She said if she could manage the situation carefully, she could minimize the damage to everyone involved. I stared at him. Phil, she's been cheating on me for 3 months. She's been spending our money on another man, lying to me every single day, and planning to leave me for someone else. How exactly were you helping me by enabling that? Phil didn't have an answer. Is there anything else I should know? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Robert's married too. His wife doesn't know about Julia. What's his last name? Colin. Robert Colin. He owns a marketing consulting firm downtown. Robert Colin. Now I had a name, and with a name I could find out everything else I needed to know. I paid for lunch and drove back to the office, leaving Phil sitting alone at the table. Our friendship was over, but that was the least of my concerns now. I had bigger plans to make. That afternoon, I did some research on Robert Colin. He was 41 years old, divorced once, currently married to a woman named Erica. His consulting firm specialized in helping small businesses develop marketing strategies, and according to his website, he'd been quite successful. The photos showed a man who looked exactly like what Julia had described. Confident, well-dressed, the kind of guy who probably spent more on his haircut than I spent on groceries. His social media profiles painted a picture of someone who enjoyed the finer things in life. Expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, high-end cars. His current car, according to his Instagram posts, was a red Porsche 911 that he'd bought 6 months ago. I also found Erica Carlin's social media profiles. She was 38, worked as a nurse at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, and seemed to genuinely love her husband. Her posts were full of pictures of the two of them at various events, always smiling, always looking happy. She had no idea her husband was cheating on her with my wife. I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about what I wanted to do with this information. I could confront Julia directly, but that would just lead to more lies and manipulation. I could call Robert and threaten him, but that would probably backfire. Or I could get creative. Julia wanted to play games? Fine, but she'd picked the wrong opponent. I might be boring, predictable Dan, but I'm also someone who solves problems for a living. And Julia had just become a problem that needed solving. I started making a list. Julia's office was having its annual Halloween party on Friday, October 25th. She'd mentioned it several times over the past few weeks, complaining about having to attend another mandatory fun corporate event. Her company, Brennan and Associates, went all out for Halloween. Costumes were required, there would be prizes for the best outfits, and all the clients and vendors would be invited. It was going to be the perfect opportunity. I spent the week preparing. First, I needed to gather more evidence of Julia's affair. The GPS data was useful, but I needed something more concrete. something undeniable. I started by checking our credit card statements more carefully. Julia had been using her personal card for most of her affair-related expenses, but she'd also been using our joint account for things she thought I wouldn't notice. Expensive lunches at restaurants I'd never heard of, always for 2 people. Purchases at lingerie stores, lingerie I'd never seen. A hotel room charge from 2 weeks ago when she'd supposedly been at a work conference in Milwaukee. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source, Julia herself. On Wednesday evening, she was taking a shower when her phone started buzzing with text messages. She'd left it on the kitchen counter, and the messages were appearing on the lock screen. Robert, can't wait to see you tonight. I have a surprise for you. Robert, wear the red dress, the one I bought you. Robert, I told Erica I'm working late again. We have until midnight. I took pictures of the messages with my own phone, then deleted the photos from my camera roll and stored them in a secure cloud folder. Julia came downstairs 20 minutes later, checked her phone, and smiled. I have to go out tonight, she said. Last-minute client crisis. On a Wednesday night? Unfortunately, yes. These things don't follow a convenient schedule. She left at 7:30, wearing a red dress I'd never seen before. On Thursday, I made a decision that I knew would change everything. I called Erica Colin. I'd found her work number through the hospital's website, and I called during her lunch break, when she'd be away from patients but available to talk. Northwestern Memorial, Cardiac Unit. This is Erica. Hi, Erica. My name is Dan Rourke. I think we need to talk about our spouses. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, what? Your husband, Robert, is having an affair with my wife, Julia. I have evidence, and I think you deserve to know. Another pause, longer this time. I think you have the wrong number. Robert Colin, 41 years old, drives a red Porsche, owns Colin Marketing Solutions. Your husband. How do you know who my husband is? Because my wife has been sleeping with him for 3 months, and I've been investigating their relationship. I heard her take a shaky breath. Can you prove this? Yes. Can you meet me somewhere private? I'll show you everything. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near her hospital after her shift ended. I brought printed copies of the credit card statements, screenshots of the text messages, and a detailed timeline of Julia's lies and deceptions. Erica was a small woman with dark hair and kind eyes that looked like they'd been crying recently. She sat across from me in a corner booth and examined my evidence with the methodical attention of someone accustomed to dealing with high-stakes situations. How long have you known? She asked finally. I figured it out a week ago, but I've been suspicious for months. What about you? I suspected something was wrong, but I thought it was work stress. Robert's been distant lately, working late more often, taking phone calls in the other room. He bought new clothes, started going to the gym, changed his cologne. She laughed bitterly. All the classic signs, and I ignored them because I didn't want to believe it. What do you want to do about it? She looked at me with those tired eyes. I want to make them both pay for this. Good, I said, because I have a plan. Friday afternoon, I left work early and drove to Julia's office building. The Halloween party was starting at 5, and I wanted to be there when it began. I'd spent Thursday evening preparing my materials. I'd created a digital presentation that included all the evidence I'd gathered, the credit card statements, the text messages, the GPS data showing Julia's real whereabouts during her supposed work meetings. I'd also included some additional information that Erica had provided about Robert's lies and manipulations. The presentation was saved on a USB drive, and I'd also uploaded it to the cloud so I could access it from any computer. Julia's office building was buzzing with activity when I arrived. Employees were arriving in costume, and I could see decorations being set up in the conference rooms. I waited in the lobby until I saw someone I recognized, Amanda Chen, one of Julia's colleagues, whom I'd met at several company events. Amanda, good to see you. Oh, hi, Dan. Are you here for the party? Where's your costume? I'm not staying long, just dropping something off for Julia. Is she here yet? Yeah, she's upstairs getting ready. The party's in conference room A on the 3rd floor. Thanks. Hey Amanda, could you do me a favor? Julia's been working on a special presentation for tonight, something she wanted to surprise everyone with. Could you make sure the AV equipment is set up in the conference room? She'll need to connect her laptop to the projector. Sure, no problem. What's the presentation about? Oh, you'll see. It's quite a surprise. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor and found conference room A, which had been decorated with fake spider webs, plastic skeletons, and orange and black streamers. About 30 people were already there, including several I recognized as Julia's friends and colleagues. I spotted Lexi immediately. She was dressed as a witch, which seemed appropriate. Priya was there too, wearing a vampire costume and holding a glass of wine. They were standing near the refreshment table, talking animatedly about something. Julia was across the room, dressed as a 1920s flapper. She looked beautiful, happy, completely at ease. She was talking to a group of her colleagues, gesturing with her hands, clearly telling a story that had everyone's attention. She hadn't seen me yet. I walked over to the AV setup and connected my laptop to the projector. The screen was positioned so that everyone in the room could see it clearly. Excuse me, I said loudly, getting everyone's attention. Sorry to interrupt, but I have a special presentation that I think you'll all find very interesting. Julia turned around and saw me for the first time. Her face went white. Dan? What are you doing here? I'm here to share some information about my wife's recent work projects, I said, clicking to the first slide of my presentation. The slide was titled Julia's Secret Client and featured a photo of Robert Colin that I'd taken from his company website. Dan, stop, Julia said, moving toward me. Whatever you think you're doing, I'm doing what you should have done 3 months ago, I said. I'm telling the truth. I clicked to the next slide, which showed the timeline of Julia's affair. Dates, times, locations, all laid out in a neat, professional format. For the past 3 months, Julia has been conducting an extensive relationship with Robert Colin, who runs a marketing consulting firm downtown. This relationship has involved regular meetings at his apartment, expensive dinners at high-end restaurants, and frequent overnight stays. The room was completely silent now. Everyone was staring at the screen, then at Julia, then back at the screen. Dan, please, Julia whispered. Don't do this. The next slide shows the financial impact of this relationship, I continued. Julia has spent approximately $12,000 of our joint money on gifts, dinners, hotels, and clothing related to this affair. I clicked again, showing the credit card statements with the relevant charges highlighted. Lexi stepped forward. Julia, what is this? What's he talking about? He's having some kind of breakdown, Julia said desperately. Dan, you're embarrassing yourself. The next slide shows text messages between Julia and Robert from this week, I said, clicking again. The messages appeared on the screen, including Robert's references to his wife and his instructions for Julia to wear the dress he'd bought her. As you can see, Robert is married to someone else, a nurse named Erica Colin, who was unaware of this relationship until yesterday. I clicked to the final slide, which was a photo I'd taken of Julia and Robert together outside his apartment building the night before. They were kissing passionately, completely oblivious to their surroundings. This photo was taken last night at approximately 9:30 p.m., during what Julia told me was a client crisis that required her immediate attention. The room erupted. People were talking all at once, some asking questions, others making shocked exclamations. Lexi and Priya were staring at Julia like they'd never seen her before. Julia was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, her flapper costume suddenly looking ridiculous instead of charming. You bastard, she said to me. How could you do this to me? How could I do this to you? I asked. Julia, you've been cheating on me for 3 months. You've been lying to everyone in this room, using them as alibis for your affair. You've been stealing money from our joint account to fund your relationship with a married man. And you're asking how I could do this to you? Ms. Whitaker, Julia's boss, stepped forward. She was dressed as a businesswoman, which wasn't much of a costume since that's what she was every day. "Julia, is this true?" she asked. Julia looked around the room at all the faces staring at her. Her colleagues, her friends, her clients, all waiting for her answer. "It's complicated," she said finally. "No," I said. "It's actually very simple. You made a choice to have an affair. You made a choice to lie about it. You made a choice to steal money to fund it. And now you're facing the consequences of those choices." Ms. Whitaker's expression was ice cold. "Julia, I think you should leave. We'll discuss this on Monday morning." "Ms. Whitaker, please, this is a private matter. A private matter that you've been conducting during work hours, using company resources, and involving our clients. This is absolutely a company matter." Julia looked around the room one more time, her eyes pleading for someone to defend her. But Lexi and Priya were looking at the floor, her colleagues were whispering among themselves, and her clients were staring at her with expressions of disgust and disappointment. She ran out of the room, still crying. I disconnected my laptop from the projector and packed it up calmly. "Sorry to disrupt your party," I said to the room in general. "I hope you all have a wonderful evening." I walked out of the building and sat in my car for a few minutes, letting the adrenaline wear off. My phone was buzzing with text messages and missed calls, but I ignored them. I had one more stop to make tonight. Robert Carlin's office was in a high-rise building downtown, and according to the building directory, his company occupied the entire 15th floor. I took the elevator up and found the door to Carlin Marketing Solutions. The office was dark, but I could see light coming from under the door of what looked like a corner office. I knocked. "We're closed," came a voice from inside. "Robert, it's Dan Rourke, Julia's husband. I think we should talk." There was a long pause, then the sound of footsteps. The door opened, and I got my first good look at the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, well-dressed, confident in the way that men with money and success often are. He was also clearly nervous. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to have a conversation about my wife." "Look, Dan, I know this is awkward, but Julia and I are over," I finished. "As of tonight." I told him about the presentation at Julia's office party, and I watched his face go pale as he realized the implications. "You destroyed her career," he said. "No, she destroyed her own career. I just made sure everyone knew about it." "What do you want from me?" "I want you to stay away from my wife. I want you to go home to your own wife and try to salvage your marriage. And I want you to understand that if you ever contact Julia again, I'll make sure Erica knows every detail of your affair." "You told Erica?" "She helped me plan tonight's presentation. She's waiting at home for you right now, and she has some questions about your recent working late schedule." Robert sank into his desk chair. "My marriage is over. Maybe, that's between you and Erica, but your relationship with Julia is definitely over." I left him sitting there and drove home, where I poured myself a large whiskey and sat down to wait for Julia. She came home at midnight, looking like she'd been through a war. "Are you happy now?" she asked. "I'm satisfied," I said. "There's a difference. You've ruined everything. My career, my reputation, my friendships. You ruined those things when you decided to have an affair. I just made sure everyone knew the truth." She stared at me with hatred in her eyes. "I'll never forgive you for this." "Good," I said. "I don't want your forgiveness. I want a divorce." Julia didn't take my demand for a divorce well. Over the weekend, she oscillated between rage, self-pity, and desperate attempts at manipulation. She tried crying, screaming, threatening, and even seduction. When none of that worked, she moved on to more creative tactics. On Monday morning, I woke up to find that she'd changed all our shared passwords: Netflix, Amazon, our joint bank account, even our home security system. She'd also called my office and left a message with my assistant claiming there was a family emergency and I wouldn't be in for several days. When I called to correct this, my assistant Jennifer sounded confused. Your wife seemed very upset, Dan. She said you were having some kind of mental health crisis and needed time to recover. I'm fine, Jennifer. There's no emergency. I'll be in this afternoon. Are you sure? Because she also called your sister and told her you were in the hospital. My sister Molly lives in Milwaukee, about an hour and a half away. She's a nurse practitioner, divorced, and fiercely protective of the people she loves. She's also not someone you want to lie to. My phone rang 5 minutes later. Dan, what the hell is going on? Julia called me at 6 this morning crying, saying you'd had some kind of breakdown and were in the emergency room. I'm not in the hospital, Molly. I'm fine. Julia's just trying to cause problems because I found out about her affair. Her what? I explained the situation to Molly, including the events at Julia's office party. My sister listened without interrupting, which is unusual for her. So she's been cheating on you for 3 months and now she's trying to make you look crazy? That's about the size of it. What do you need me to do? This is why I love my sister. No judgment, no lectures about trying to work things out, just a simple offer to help. I need you to document her lies. She's been calling people and spreading stories about me having a mental breakdown. If this goes to divorce court, I want evidence that she's been trying to damage my reputation. Consider it done. What else? I need to change all our passwords and secure our finances before she does any more damage. Dan, be careful. Desperate people do desperate things, and Julia sounds pretty desperate right now. Molly was right to be concerned. That afternoon, I came home from work to find that Julia had been busy. She'd removed half the furniture from our house, including some pieces that had belonged to my family. She'd also taken most of the electronics, all the good kitchen appliances, and several items that were clearly mine, including my laptop and my collection of vintage baseball cards. There was a note on the kitchen counter. I'm staying at Lexi's until we can work out a fair division of our assets. My lawyer will be in touch. Her lawyer turned out to be David Brennan, the senior partner at her advertising agency and someone who'd been at the Halloween party. This seemed like a conflict of interest to me, but Julia had never been particularly concerned with ethical boundaries. Brennan called me on Tuesday morning. Mr. Rourke, I'm representing Julia in your divorce proceedings. I think we should meet to discuss a reasonable settlement. I think Julia should find a different lawyer, I said. You were a witness to her affair. You can't represent her in the divorce. I'm afraid I don't see the conflict. Julia's personal relationships have nothing to do with her employment. Her personal relationships cost her her job. You fired her yesterday, remember? There was a pause. Julia is taking a temporary leave of absence to deal with this personal crisis. Is that what we're calling it? I hung up and called my own lawyer, a woman named Patricia Valdez, who'd handled my sister's divorce. Patricia was smart, tough, and had no patience for games. Dan, I've been expecting your call. Word travels fast in the legal community. What have you heard? That your wife's lawyer is claiming you're mentally unstable and that you sabotaged her career out of jealousy. He's also suggesting that you've been financially abusive and that Julia was afraid to leave you because of your controlling behavior. That's interesting, considering she's the one who stole $12,000 from our joint account to fund her affair. Do you have documentation of that? Credit card statements, bank records, receipts. I also have evidence of the affair itself, including text messages and GPS data. Good. We're going to need all of that. Julia's lawyer is painting a picture of a woman trapped in an abusive marriage who found comfort in the arms of another man. We need to show that she's a calculating adulteress who systematically deceived her husband and stole marital assets to fund her affair. I spent the rest of the week gathering documentation and preparing for what was clearly going to be a nasty divorce. Julia, meanwhile, was conducting a public relations campaign designed to make me look like the villain in our marriage. She'd apparently told everyone that I'd been emotionally abusive, financially controlling, and completely inadequate. According to the stories that were making their way back to me through mutual friends, I was a jealous, paranoid husband who'd driven her into another man's arms and then ruined her career out of spite. The stories were creative, I'll give her that. I was supposedly so controlling that I monitored her every movement. I was so jealous that I forbade her from having male friends. I was so emotionally distant that she'd been desperately lonely for years. Some people believed her. Julia has always been charming and persuasive, and she was playing the role of the wronged wife to perfection. But other people were asking questions, especially after they learned about the $12,000 she'd spent on her affair. The turning point came on Thursday evening when I got an unexpected visitor. I was sitting in my mostly empty living room eating takeout Chinese food and watching baseball when someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Erica Colin standing on my front porch. "Erica, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Can I come in?" She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair was disheveled, and she was wearing scrubs like she'd come straight from work. "How are you holding up?" I asked, leading her to the kitchen. "I'm not. Robert moved out on Sunday. He's staying at a hotel downtown claiming he needs space to think about our marriage." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You did me a favor. I've been living with a liar for months, maybe longer. At least now I know the truth." She sat down at my kitchen table and pulled out her phone. "I found something I think you need to see." She showed me a series of text messages between Robert and Julia from the past few days. "Robert, we need to be careful. Dan's getting lawyers involved." Julia, "Don't worry, I'm handling it. My lawyer thinks we can claim emotional abuse." Robert, "What about the money you spent?" Julia, "I'll say he was controlling our finances and I had to hide money to protect myself." Robert, "And the affair?" Julia, "I'll say you were helping me plan my escape from an abusive marriage. We'll frame it as emotional support that turned physical." Erica looked at me with anger in her eyes. "They're planning to destroy you in court. How did you get these messages?" "Robert left his laptop at home when he moved out. I know his passwords." She paused. "There's more. They're planning to get back together after your divorce is finalized. Julia thinks she can get half your assets plus alimony, and then she and Robert can start fresh somewhere else." I stared at the messages, feeling that familiar cold anger settling in my chest. "Erica, would you be willing to testify about these messages in court?" "Absolutely, but I think we can do better than that." "What do you mean?" She smiled for the first time since I'd known her. "I mean, I think it's time to give them a taste of their own medicine." We spent the next 2 hours planning what Erica called Operation Payback. It was more elaborate than anything I'd done so far, but it was also more satisfying. The plan was simple. We were going to expose Julia and Robert's post-affair scheming in the most public way possible. Robert was scheduled to give a presentation to the Chicago Small Business Association on Saturday morning. It was a big event, with about 200 local business owners in attendance, and Robert had been promoting it on social media for weeks. Julia was planning to attend as his marketing consultant. According to the text messages Erica had found, this was going to be their first public appearance together since the Halloween party disaster. We were going to crash their party. Saturday morning, I arrived at the hotel conference center where the business association meeting was being held. I'd prepared another presentation, this one focusing on Robert and Julia's post-affair planning and their scheme to defraud me in divorce court. Erica was already there, sitting in the back row with a laptop and a grim expression. Robert took the stage at 10 o'clock sharp, looking confident and professional in an expensive suit. His presentation was titled Building Client Loyalty Through Authentic Relationships, which struck me as ironic given his recent behavior. Julia was sitting in the front row, dressed in a conservative business suit, and taking notes like she was genuinely interested in his presentation. They were both playing their roles perfectly. I waited until Robert was halfway through his presentation, then I stood up in the middle of the audience. "Excuse me, Robert, but I have a question about authentic relationships." Robert's face went white when he saw me. "I'm sorry, this is a closed presentation for association members only." "Actually, I'm a member. Dan Rourke, Rourke IT Consulting. I've been a member for 3 years." This was true. I'd joined the association when I started my consulting business, though I rarely attended meetings. "My question is about authenticity," I continued. "How do you build authentic relationships with clients when you're lying to your own wife?" The room went silent. Robert was staring at me like a deer caught in headlights. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Really?" "Because I have some text messages here that suggest otherwise." I pulled out my phone and started reading from the screenshots Erica had provided. Robert Colin, October 29th. "We need to be careful. Dan's getting lawyers involved." Julia Rourke, October 29th. "Don't worry, I'm handling it. My lawyer thinks we can claim emotional abuse." People in the audience were starting to murmur and look around at each other. "Should I continue?" I asked. "Because there's a lot more where that came from." Julia stood up from the front row. "Dan, you need to stop this right now." "Actually, Julia, I think these people deserve to know what kind of business ethics Robert practices. After all, if he'll lie to his wife and cheat with a married woman, what's to stop him from lying to his clients?" I continued reading from the text messages, including the parts about Julia's plan to claim emotional abuse and Robert's concerns about the money she'd stolen from our joint account. By the time I finished, the room was in chaos. People were talking loudly, some were getting up to leave, and Robert was standing on the stage, looking like he wanted to disappear. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "I present to you Robert Colin and Julia Rourke, experts in building authentic relationships." I walked out of the conference room, leaving them to deal with the aftermath. My phone started ringing before I even made it to the parking lot. "Dan, this is Patricia Valdez. I just got a very interesting call from Julia's lawyer. Apparently they want to discuss an expedited settlement." "Really? What kind of settlement?" "The kind where Julia takes her personal belongings and walks away with nothing else. No alimony, no claim on your retirement accounts, no share of the house. And in exchange, you agree not to pursue criminal charges for the money she stole from your joint account." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Tell them we have a deal." The divorce papers were signed on a rainy Thursday morning in November, exactly 6 weeks after the Halloween party that had started this whole mess. Julia and I met at Patricia Valdez's office, along with our respective lawyers, to finalize the settlement. Julia looked like she'd aged 5 years in 6 weeks. Her hair was different, shorter, darker, and she'd lost weight. She was wearing a black suit that made her look like she was attending a funeral, which seemed appropriate. We didn't speak to each other during the meeting. Our lawyers handled all the communication, passing documents back and forth like we were hostile foreign nations negotiating a peace treaty. The settlement was exactly what Patricia had described. Julia would take her personal belongings and walk away with nothing else. No alimony, no claim on my retirement accounts, no share of the house. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue criminal charges for the money she'd stolen. It was the best possible outcome for me, but it felt hollow. 8 years of marriage reduced to a stack of legal documents and a division of property. When the papers were signed, Julia's lawyer gathered up his files and left quickly. Julia lingered for a moment, looking like she wanted to say something. "Dan," she started. "Don't," I said. "Whatever you're about to say, just don't." She nodded and left without another word. Patricia and I sat in her office for a few minutes after they'd gone. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Relieved? Angry? Sad? All at the same time." "That's normal. Divorce is never easy, even when it's the right thing to do. What happens now? Now you rebuild your life. You're 42 years old, financially stable, and free from a woman who didn't deserve you. The world is full of possibilities. I drove home to my empty house and sat in my empty living room, thinking about possibilities. Julia had taken most of the furniture when she moved out, so the place looked like a bachelor pad, decorated by someone with no imagination or money. I needed to buy new furniture, new dishes, new everything. I also needed to figure out what I wanted my new life to look like. The first thing I did was call my sister. "Molly, it's over. The divorce is final. How do you feel?" "Like I've been holding my breath for 6 weeks and I can finally exhale." "Good. When are you coming to visit? I want to take you out for the most expensive steak dinner I can afford." "Soon. I need to get my house back in order first." "Dan, can I give you some advice?" "Sure. Don't spend too much time alone right now. Grief is weird, and divorce grief is especially weird. Even when you know you made the right choice, there's still a sense of loss. Stay busy, stay social, and don't isolate yourself." Molly was right, as usual. I spent the next few weeks reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during the final months of my marriage. I joined a softball league, started going to trivia night at a bar near my office, and even signed up for a cooking class. I also heard through the grapevine what had happened to Julia and Robert after our respective public humiliations. Julia had been officially terminated from her job at Brennan & Associates. The company couldn't afford to keep someone who'd become the subject of office gossip and client complaints. She'd found a new job at a smaller agency, but it was a significant step down in terms of salary and responsibility. Robert's business had taken a major hit after the Small Business Association incident. Several clients had terminated their contracts, and his reputation in the local business community was severely damaged. He and Erica were getting divorced, and she was taking him for everything she could get. The most satisfying piece of information came from an unexpected source, Phil Morrison. Phil had approached me at work about 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, looking nervous and apologetic. "Dan, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Sure, Phil. What's up?" "I wanted to apologize again for my role in everything that happened. I know I betrayed your trust, and I feel terrible about it." "Phil, we've been through this. You were manipulated by Julia. I don't hold you responsible for her choices." "I appreciate that, but there's something else I think you should know." He looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "Julia called me last week. She wanted me to lie for her in court, to say that you'd been abusive or controlling. When I refused, she threatened to tell our boss that I'd been sharing confidential client information with her." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that if she tried to involve me in any more of her schemes, I'd report her to the police for harassment." Phil paused, then smiled for the first time since I'd known him. "But here's the best part. She also tried to get Robert to take her back. Apparently she showed up at his hotel room crying, saying that everything had been a misunderstanding and they could still be together. And he threw her out, literally. Hotel security had to escort her from the building." I felt a surge of satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. "Thanks for telling me, Phil. And thanks for not lying for her. I owed you that much." December came and went quietly. I spent Christmas with Molly and her kids, and New Year's Eve at home with a good book and a bottle of wine. It was the most peaceful holiday season I'd had in years. In January, I started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and casual dinners with women I met through friends or online. It felt strange at first, like I was betraying something, but gradually it started to feel normal. One evening in February, I was having dinner at a restaurant downtown when I saw a familiar face at a table across the room. It was Erica Colin, and she was with a man I didn't recognize. They were laughing about something, and she looked happier than I'd ever seen her. She spotted me as they were leaving and came over to my table. "Dan, how are you?" "I'm good, Erica. You look great. How are things going?" "Really well, actually. The divorce was finalized last month, and I'm starting to feel like myself again." "I'm glad to hear that." She gestured toward the man she'd been with, who was waiting by the door. That's Michael. We work together at the hospital. He's been incredibly patient with me through all this mess. He seems like a good guy. He is. Dan, I want to thank you again for everything you did. I know it wasn't easy for you, but you helped me see the truth about my marriage. We helped each other. She smiled. Yes, we did. Take care of yourself, Dan. After she left, I sat there thinking about the past 6 months. The discovery of Julia's affair, the public confrontations, the divorce, the slow process of rebuilding my life. It had been the most difficult period of my adult life, but also, in some ways, the most liberating. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought I was. I'd learned that I could fight for myself when necessary. Most importantly, I'd learned that I deserved better than someone who would lie to me, cheat on me, and try to destroy my reputation when I caught her. My phone buzzed with a text message from a woman named Sarah whom I'd been seeing for a few weeks. She was a teacher, divorced like me, with a great sense of humor and no patience for drama. "How was your day?" she'd written. "Good," I typed back.